So now let's talk about freedom of speech. Let's talk about freedom of speech. Now, what was slightly annoying to me was that a few people behaved exactly as I predicted. And what I mean by that is I addressed an issue and I addressed the case made by one of its greatest champions, J.B. Bury, Oxford intellectual, one of my favorite editors, great historian, and a serious, dedicated advocate of free speech. And I think that most of you will agree that I conclusively tore apart his case for free speech. So what did some people promptly do? Well, it's just one man. It's just one man's argument. You have to make a positive case for the non-right of free speech. How does that make any sense? If you want to argue that free speech is a right, then you have to produce the argument, and I, as the person who doesn't believe in it, criticize that argument. I don't have to make a negative argument that something doesn't exist. Okay? So, as I promised, Bury was not so much making the definitive case for free speech. I didn't say he was making the definitive case for free speech. No, he did have a case for free speech. It was just wrong. It was just, it was a dialectic case for free speech. He also had rhetorical cases for it, but it was wrong. And I showed why it was wrong. I explained why it was wrong. So then we look at, so I said, okay, it doesn't matter. Pick your champion. Tell me whichever champion of free speech you want to name, and I will take down that case. So I picked one. And I picked one that I didn't know, because I thought that would be more interesting for you guys. I already know how to go after Hobbes. I already know how to go after Locke. And and I noticed what I did was I did a search for best cases for free speech. Lewis, you're wrong. Lewis, you need to stop. I'm about to ban you because you always have some stupid comment on something. My criticism was you didn't comprehensively tear about his argument. It's a whole freaking book, Lewis. You expect me to actually cover the entire book? I covered the core of his argument. That is the core of his argument. It's not just the one part of his argument. That was the key part of his argument. Okay? If you're not smart enough to follow along, stop listening to this channel. Okay? I don't mind stupid questions. Okay? What I do not like is stupid criticism, because it's wrong. You're wrong. You've been wrong every single time you've tried to criticize me. So if you can't up your game or learn to shut the hell up, I will ban you. Okay? You're interrupting the whole thing. You're offering distractions. If you can't come up with a decent argument, then shut the hell up. So we're going to go to, I went to a list. The Guardian made a list, and they listed the 20 most important elements, or the most important aspects of the development of free speech over time. And it began, unsurprisingly, with Socrates. And then the second one it listed was the Magna Carta. And the third one that it listed was a piece called The Education of a Christian Prince by Erasmus. Now, I have read some Erasmus, and was a really intelligent guy. He was the leading intellectual in Europe at the time. And so I thought, okay, I haven't actually read The Education of a Christian Prince. Let's see what it is. Let's see what this argument is. And so, okay, that sounds good, Lewis. You come up with your argument, you email it to me, and I'll have a look at it. That will work a lot better than you kind of like trying to do these little sniping critiques online. So just email me your case. I'll critique it in a dark stream. So in 1516, Erasmus wrote The Education of a Christian Prince. And this is famous because it was the source of a phrase that the free speech advocates like to refer to a lot. In a free state, tongues too should be free. Okay, that sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty, free speech. He sounds like a good advocate of free speech. But when you actually read the whole thing, when you actually read the whole piece, you realize this is not a defense of free speech. The first, because he lays out the duties of a prince. This is basically similar to Machiavelli's The Prince. The first duty of a good prince is to desire the best things possible. The second duty, to see by what means all things that are evil can be avoided or removed, and on the other hand, how good conditions can be gained, developed, and strengthened. Do you see the first problem? The second duty is to see by what means all things that are evil can be removed. This is not looking like, I read that and I'm thinking, this is not looking very free speech friendly to me. What then is fitting praise for a prince? If he has eyes to the back as well as to the front, as Homer says, I'm not going to abuse the French. That is, if he can look back on what has already happened and ahead to the future, thereby having the greatest knowledge possible, his wisdom will be used for the good of his country, not for himself. Well, that's actually reminiscent of one of the arguments that Bury admitted was an effective one against free speech. So again, we're seeing this trend that does not seem to be free speech friendly, despite the way that that original statement about tongues being free. Then he goes on to say, the great mass of people are swayed by false opinions and are no different from those in Plato's cave, who took the empty shadows as the real things. It is the part of a good prince to admire none of the things that the common people consider of great consequence, but to judge all things on their own merits as good or bad. So what does this mean? The prince is supposed to judge all things on their own merits as good or bad and remove the things that are evil. This is actually stating that the prince has a duty to suppress free speech, to not permit bad and evil speech. He goes on to say, therefore, the tutor should first see that his pupil loves and honors virtue as the finest quality of all, the most felicitous, the most fitting a prince, and that he loathes and shuns moral turpitude as the foulest and most terrible of things. So, do you think that he's going to permit speech that advocates moral turpitude? Of course not. Absolutely not. I didn't. Can we get rid? I don't know who Andy Mack is. Haven't seen the paid. Oh, I see. Yeah, we'll get rid of him. We got a little gamma troll there. So then we next go on to the real character of the prince is revealed by his speech rather than by his dress. Every word that is dropped from the lips of the prince is scattered wide among the masses. He should exercise the greatest care to see that whatever he says bears the stamp of genuine worth. So they're saying that speech is important, and good speech is very important. Virtue is important. Virtue is a duty. Even the Emperor Hadrian, a pagan and not to be classed among the good princes, would never listen to a charge of lèse majesté, and not even that cruel monster Nero gave much heed to secret accusation on that charge. There was another one who paid no attention at all to charges of this sort, and said, "In a free country, tongues likewise should be free. Therefore, there are no crimes which a good prince will pardon more readily or more gladly than those which affect him alone." Okay, so that's what they're making this appeal to free speech on. That statement right there. But is he actually advocating free speech in general? No. He's saying that the prince should readily forgive crimes of speech that are directed against him. They're still crimes. Remember, there are no crimes which a good prince will pardon more readily or gladly than those which affect him alone. What he's saying there is that the king should be magnanimous. This is what C.S. Lewis described in A Horse and His Boy, when he says, "The king must be the first in every attack and the last in every retreat. He must laugh louder over a scantier dinner than any man in the kingdom." It's not about free speech at all. It's about being magnanimous if you're the leader. Jesus described this you can see this same teaching in Jesus when he says, "The first shall be last." Okay? And so it has nothing to do with free speech, and to show to demonstrate how ridiculous it is that it appeals, guess who said that? When he said, remember, Erasmus didn't write this himself. Erasmus was quoting someone. There was another one. He's referring to a leader. He's referring to a prince, a king. "In a free country, tongues likewise should be free." I'll give you all a chance to guess who he's talking about. He is talking about a significant ancient figure. Go ahead and guess. Guess what figure actually produced this statement that is considered to be the third important development in free speech by The Guardian. Go ahead. Take your guesses. I'm certain that no one is going to get it off the top of their head. Don't look it up on Google or whatever. Just take your best guess, because it will amuse you. I guarantee you. Socrates is a good guess, but no. It's not Pericles. That's also a good guess. It was not Nero. That's closer, though. Oh, hey, Nick. We have greatness in the house. Nick Cole is here. It wasn't Nero. It wasn't Stalin. This was written in 1519. Jordan Peterson, clearly. Plato. Plato's actually a pretty good guess if you've read The Republic. Alexander, no. This is the funniest part. It's the Emperor Tiberius. Tiberius is one of the Roman emperors who was one of the least liberal Roman emperors out there. Okay? It was actually, Suetonius records Tiberius saying this. I actually laughed out loud when I saw that it was Tiberius. "In a free country, tongues likewise should be free." This is somewhat akin to saying something positive about the Jews and arguing that this is making a good case for the Jews, and then having it revealed that it was Adolf Hitler. That's the level of nonsense that we're talking about. Commodus was a very good guess. Okay, so the third significant argument for the freedom of speech is a quote from the Emperor Tiberius, quoted in a 16th century paper by Erasmus that specifically recommends that the prince not permit freedom of speech. That's what this boils down to. In fact, it even says that certain arts are not countenanced by the laws on the ground that they are too closely allied to imposture and are too frequently practiced by deceit. For example, astrology and the so-called alchemy, even if someone happens to be employing them for an honorable purpose. Okay, so you're not allowed to practice certain arts because they're too closely allied to imposture and too frequently practiced by deceit. Do you think that that is a philosophy that defends or is in line with freedom of speech in any way, shape, or form? So there you go. You wanted another case against another champion of free speech? Would you agree that this sufficiently demonstrates that the education of a Christian prince does not provide a compelling case for freedom of speech? So now we've taken down Bury. We've taken down Erasmus. How many more of these various philosophers do you need to see completely destroyed before you admit that there is no legitimate case to claim a right of free speech?